Hello and welcome to week 5. This week we're going to discuss media law and how it pertains, obviously, to writing and journalism. There are a lot of terms and there's a lot of definitions this week, so predominantly I'll just be reading each slide. Feel free to take your time, scroll through it, go back if there's something that you want to kind of reiterate for yourself. This is a large area, and obviously only taking one lecture in 1 week to go over is not nearly enough time. But hopefully this will at least give you a working knowledge so that if you have any larger questions, you can continue to seek it out. And we have we actually have an entire course in our graduate program for copyright and obviously media law and discussing those type of things. But specific to libel, this is an important topic and an important area, especially now that we're dealing with social media and blogging and just kind of the universal plagiarism that is. I heard someone say it and I put it in. What does that mean now? So hopefully this week is helpful. Hopefully it's food for thought. Hopefully it's something that you'll build upon as you continue. All right, let's begin. First is just obviously the First Amendment. A Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right to people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government. All right, so within the First Amendment, there's a lot happening here. We don't have time to get into it as Christians or as people of faith, what we're seeing in here and some of the areas we may differ. Let's just look at it within the lens of this course, which is an English course pertaining to writing for the media. Obviously, we're talking about the freedom of speech or of the press. Those are both massive freedoms that we have in this country, and we should never take them lightly. We should be incredibly grateful because in many ways, freedom of the press is like the last bastion of a free society, in my opinion. And I thank God for the freedom of the press and the freedom of speech, and we'll continue that. All right. Public access, access to the government info. Public access to information about the actions of the government is essential to the function of a democracy, obviously. Just not too long ago, some papers that were classified were declassified and actually were released to the public. And there are also, there's, obviously the National Library, there's a lot of areas where you can go and you can request certain documentation. That kind of transparency is necessary for the freedoms that we have to be sustained and to make sure there's checks and balances. Now, obviously, within that, we all understand that there are many, many places in which the government won't say certain things, whatever the greater good is, and that's hard to define often. But let's say for military reasons, obviously things like WikiLeaks and Snowden, obviously Julian Assange and Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden were two individuals who said, you know what, we think public access should be even more, and so they released even more documentation. And that's a larger issue that we're not even talking about. We're just letting you know that there is, you have the ability, to access these documents. So access extends to the inspection of documents held by the government with only specific exemptions, though not an absolute right. So classified for the public good. Again, what does public good mean? Public record as well as other documents you are able to access. So if you're doing research about a case or let's say a congressman or some sort of situation, you should be able to access certain documents as you're doing research. And even if you're not part of the judicial system as a lawyer or a judge or even a journalist within obviously the news arena, you as a private citizen actually have the ability to go and to look up things. But obviously it's not an absolute right. You're not allowed to look up anything, but most of you I'm sure understand that. Gag order. Okay, preventing the discussion of a case outside of the courtroom. Oftentimes what will happen is if you come into a courtroom, you're going to want to make sure that the judge and the attorneys and obviously the plaintiff and the defendant, if it's very sensitive material, and let's say even that you have a jury of 12 of the individual's peers, you would want to make sure that what's happening in the courtroom is not disseminated into the public because it may influence public opinion. Maybe they haven't actually even chosen the jury yet. That could absolutely influence or sway the way people perceive the plaintiff or the defendant. So again, this is just in a sense to kind of protect the rights of the individuals in that, as well as sometimes there might be a gag order. Let's say if there's a minor involved, and so the minor wants to come in and testify against someone who's hurt them, but there want to be a gag order so that journalists won't print the minor's name. That's in the public good. That's in the better and the greater good for the individual as a minor. So that might be one specific example. And Supreme Court has said that speech by attorneys as officers of the court may be regulated to protect the integrity of the judicial system, obviously. So this is specific to, obviously, attorneys going out and explaining certain details of the case that they don't want the public to know as of yet, or maybe ever. Again, if it's to protect someone. If someone's going to get on the witness stand, they're able to see their accuser within the courtroom, but for whatever reason, they may say, you know what, we want to make sure that this information is not leaked. A typical gag order does not prevent a reporter from asking questions, but it does bar the trial participants and court officers from answering them. If you're a journalist, you have the right to ask the question. No one's saying that's illegal. It would just simply be legal if there was a gag order for the attorney or the judge or possibly even the jurors to speak about that or speak about those details to a reporter. Decorum orders regulate the conduct of reporters covering high-profile trials. Obviously, this goes pretty much without saying, depending on whether you are covering a trial or possibly, I'm sure there's even decorum within working within the White House, where there are certain places in which people understand this is a different atmosphere and environment. The court may restrict the use of camera and recording devices at specific locations in or around the courthouses. Also, the court may direct that witnesses or jurors not be photographed as they come and go from the court, restricting use and operation of certain recording devices at the courthouse. Obviously, let's say that someone's on a murder, there's a murder trial, and they know that the individual who is now being tried for murder has a large constituent of followers or gang members or some dangerous group of people that would want to protect this person who's on trial, right? Or at least defend them. And if you were to take pictures of all the jurors and you were to post them, well, or even post their email addresses or their home addresses, these people who want to protect this person who's on trial could easily go out and try to hurt. So oftentimes it's to protect those who are trying to keep our justice system moving along. Hopefully this is making sense. But again, all to be said, if someone's on a murder trial, let's say that they're the head of a gang, the other gang members may want to hurt those jurors or the other attorneys involved, and so you'd say we don't want pictures, we don't want names, obviously we want the court to do what it needs to do without everyone in the outside understanding all the details. And yet we have a right to know, and so that's kind of an interesting tension. Resources. Some sources who possess important information of great public significance will speak to a journalist only if they are promised confidentiality. In 2005, a study showed that out of 10,000 reports, 13% of them had confidential sources. This is actually crucial because as a journalist, you are allowed to take quotes from individuals. So if you come to me and you're talking about the digital media department, and you'd say, hi, Dominic, we'd love to talk to you. I said, absolutely, let's sit. We discussed something, and they said, can we quote you? I said, feel free. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And so they would take the quote, and at the end, I'd say, Dominic Garcia said, right? Because it's something I'm excited about. I love what we're doing at UVF. I'm excited about the department. And so that would be, let's say it's some other issue, right? And I know something that maybe I shouldn't know, or I know something but I'm not allowed to share, but I know the public needs to know. So I may call up a journalist and say, hey, this is a story you need to cover, and they're going to say it's a confidential source. Now, the tough thing is this, and we're going to get into it. A lot of times, if the only source they have is me, and I'm unwilling to give my name, well, either they're going to have to give my name, and thus I can sue them, or the person that is being spoken about, or the organization, could turn and sue the journalist, right, to try to find out my name, or say that they're making up the story. They don't have a confidential source. And this comes back to the famous case in the 1970s with Nixon, and there was someone that was an informant, and they wanted the name, and actually for think it was 50 years, no one actually knew. I mean, they were literally, Woodward and Bernstein for the Washington Post, I think, were able to keep that quiet, which is really quite amazing. Anyway, so again, being mindful of just because someone gave you a quote, you need to ask them, can I use your name? Okay? That's very, very important. Sources. It's hard to prove the truth of a statement if the source of the information cannot be revealed. This can result in a liable claim. So if, let's say hypothetically, you were going to do a story about a church, sadly enough, and you were saying that that church was embezzling money, and the person that you actually got the information from was one of the elders of the church. Well, that person, it would be great. That person has firsthand account of the books of the church, and they're able to speak into what's happening. They have their eyewitness account, right? But let's say the elder of the church doesn't want their name to be known, right? Because if they are, it would obviously hurt their relationship with the people in the church. Maybe people around in other churches would no longer respect. I mean, there could be a lot of issues. So that the elder, per se, may say, I'll give you this information, but you need to actually go now and find proof. You can't just use me as the proof. But if you were to just use the elder's information without their name, then the church could say, well, that's a liable suit. You're speaking out against us without any kind of proof. We want to know who your source is. And then the journalist says, well, I'm not going to tell you my source. And this goes back and forth, and then people get sued, and it's problematic, right? So, again, God forbid that ever happens in a church. It could be a business, it could be an organization, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a school, whatever it is. The point is that things do happen in organizations. People find out about it. They don't have the kind of power to get the information out there. They go to a journalist, and they express the issue. And now the tension of, do you give up your name, right? Which will probably hurt yourself and your family and maybe your job for the betterment of the community. Or on the flip side, do you keep your name quiet and say, no, you can't use my name, but then also it will hurt the credibility of the story. So, okay, defamation. Defamation means injury to reputation. The two sides of defamation are libel and slander. Libel is written or otherwise printed. So libel would obviously be print journalism. Slander would be spoken. So if I get up and I actually say that this person did A, B, and C, and they're all negative, that would be slander, right? If I were to print that they did A, B, and C, and it was all negative, that would be libel, right? Now, the issue is that if I can prove that A, B, and C is true, then it's neither libel nor slander. It's truth. Right? But if I were to get up and say that they did A, B, and C, and A, B, and C were false, whether in print or in spoken, or if I was spoken, there obviously would be a lawsuit there. All right, this is a lot. I know. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to kind of. It's definitely food for thought, right? Okay. Defamation broadcast by TV or radio is also considered liable. Okay, so even if it's spoken on TV or on radio, it's still considered liable. That is still a medium, right? Rather than slander, because broadcast defamation is often recorded and carried to a wider audience, and not just full stories, but words, photos, cartoons, videos, photo captions, and headlines can all be considered defamation. Okay, so please be mindful of what you're saying and who you're saying it about. It's just important, not just obviously as a journalist, as a content creator, but even as a Christian and hopefully an ethical, moral person. Defamation, as with most laws, are different depending on which state you are in. So again, you'd have to be mindful. We live in Pennsylvania. If you were to move, obviously, to Maryland or Florida or Texas or wherever, you would have to find out the law, right? I have family that is in the law profession, and they get barred in different states, okay? Same way, be mindful of what the laws are. Illinois, as you see here, is different than Texas, okay? And you can read that and you can do more research. And I would actually highly recommend that you would do, if you ever get serious about writing, that you would look up the defamation laws within your state. Sources. A reporter who reveals the name of a reporter who reveals the name or identity of someone who has promised confidentiality can be held liable for breach of the agreement. And pretty much what we're looking at here is simply this. If you are the journalist, okay, there's two ways in which you can get sued. If you write a story and it is a negative, scathing indictment of an organization, that organization, if you don't have evidence, can sue you for libel, right? But if you as the journalist get scared about that suit, right, the lawsuit that that organization is bringing to you, you can then give up your source, right? The problem is now the source can sue you because you gave them up. So this is why it's so important to be mindful. It's really either way you can get in trouble. But again, if you do your due diligence, if you take care of your sources, if you make sure that if you keep things confidential, that you have more evidence than just the word of your source, that let the word of your source be the beginning of the investigation, almost pointing you into the direction in which you will find the other evidence. Don't just write a story based on one person's, it's almost hearsay in a sense, right? You need more evidence. That person stated this claim, and now you go out and you find A, B, and C. But without A, B, and C, you just have the word of your source, and you could get in serious trouble either way. Thus, you can be sued by the person you are writing about for libel if you do not disclose your source. If you were to go and then give up your source, who you promised confidentiality to, you can be sued by your source. So, again, this is kind of never-ending, but important to be mindful of. But it shouldn't discourage you. It shouldn't discourage the law protects you. You can keep your source. It's confidentiality, even if the organization were to sue you, if you had more evidence to prove that your initial article was not libel. Sources. You can protect the right of your source. Shield law provides legal protection against the disclosure of sources. A court entered a default judgment against the Boston Globe for refusing to reveal its confidential source, a story that became the subject of a libel claim. A jury awarded the plaintiff $2.1 million. So, obviously, you can see that if you're not careful and you don't disclose your source, the organization could actually be sued. A court entered a default judgment against the Boston Globe, as stated prior. A journalist had to give up a source for a case, so on the other side of it, right? So one time, the Boston Globe wrote a story. They didn't give up their sources, and the organization that they had written about sued them for $2 million, and the organization won. This is the flip side. A journalist had to give up the source. The source sued the person for $200,000. So again, it's kind of a continuation of what we're talking about. A public figure must show that the journalist was acting in actual malice or in constitutional fault. Obviously, we're saying that a private citizen is different than a public figure. Let's say you're a celebrity or a politician or athlete. There's a little bit of it's still the same, but let's say you're a tabloid and you were to write an article. It's a little bit different. Means publication with knowledge that a statement is false or in reckless disregard for whether it is true or false. So again, you have to know that you have to know that the article is malicious or absolutely false, as stated. The right of privacy, 1890, misappropriation of someone's name or likeness for commercial purpose, a public disclosure of private facts, a realistic intrusion upon seclusion, and false light in the public eye. Obviously, if you're a politician and you're running for the presidency, you're going to get a lot of news coverage, and there's going to be a lot of information about you if you're a celebrity and you win an Oscar, or if you are in a band. I mean, so paparazzi journalism, celebrity journalism, it's a little bit different. Obviously, there are certain things that they ask that remains private, but they're able to because you've now entered into the public domain. You are no longer a private citizen. You are a public figure. And so that does make it slightly different. But it doesn't mean that if someone were to step out and to write a story that was completely false and or malicious, obviously the individual still could sue. That I think that goes without saying. All right. So, law. So in the end, it is clear that it is not as simple as getting the source and writing the story. You need to know the facts, know that your source is speaking the facts, be willing to go the distance. If you can prove without your anonymous source that the facts are true, you might be able to fight the libel claim. But if you have to give up your source to prove your facts, you might be in trouble. The source could sue you. Also, the libel claim might be held up. Really, just the biggest thing with this week is being mindful that by writing a story about someone that puts them in a negative light, or could put them in a negative light, that you now possibly could be sued for libel. You cannot just get out and say something. Okay? You first, ethically and morally, you just shouldn't. Right? You shouldn't just rant on your blog or Facebook, right? But you can tell facts. If there's something that's negative about somebody and it's factually based, of course, you can tell the story, even if it isn't something the person would want to be told. That's okay. That's journalism. That happens often. I don't want you to tell this story about me, but actually it's true. It puts me in a bad light. That happens all the time with politicians. They make a mistake. There's moral failing. There's a financial issue, right? Journalists step out and actually prove their story, and the politician doesn't turn around and sue them. They may not like them anymore, but obviously that's legal. The issue is that if you write this entire story saying that this politician embezzled all this money and they didn't, it's a huge issue. Or even writing about other people, churches, organizations, businesses, nonprofits, possibly even friends. It really is problematic, and I think that where we could even take this possibly is what it would look like in cyberbullying. It's not part of this class, but it's something to seriously consider, the legal implications of of also cyberbullying, which pray to God nobody ever would do that at University of Valley Forge, but I understand that's a reality of our day. So being mindful of that. Be thoughtful about what you post, what you ask. If you're going to cite someone, make sure they are all right with you mentioning their name. If they are not, you need to make them an anonymous source. If the story is about someone and it will affect them in the community, make sure it is true. Otherwise, you could be sued for libel. And even if it's true and you write it in a way that seems inflammatory or with malice, you might still get a libel suit. Even if it's true and you write it in a malicious way and it doesn't have the factual basis, you could seriously you could look at a serious lawsuit on your hands. You could have serious financial implications. So again, this is kind of a scary lecture. Like, I don't want to write anything ever. No, no, no. Feel free to write. But what it should do is it should make you think before you post, think before you speak, think before you write. Tell that important story. Be a great citizen journalism who dives deep and asks serious questions. But make sure that you don't post it as fact if it is not. You can post a question, but always be mindful that as soon as you start asserting that this is truth, or you start using sources and you're unwilling to actually give their names, this could become a larger issue for you financially, obviously legally, down the road. Anyway, hope this was food for thought. Thank you so much for a great week. God bless you guys. And keep writing. Have fun with it. I know it's a heavy week. It's kind of weird. It's a weird lecture. But I really, truly believe that if you think before you post, you will have a far more successful and fruitful writing, journalist, media creation career. God bless you.